Need your daily fix on mixed martial arts?
We're going to kind of recap Bellator 155. From UFC 198.
Who's who?
Kind of a controversial decision.
And who's not.
I couldn't figure out why, and then it hit me.
Well, don't you fret, because Golden State Media Concepts got you covered. Get your daily dose of MMA podcasts. Everything from the UFC, Bellator Fighting Championship, Extreme Cage Fighting, Invicta Fighting Championship, and so much more. Join us as we talk about some of the biggest names in mixed martial arts. We've got you covered here on Golden State Media Concepts MMA Podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC MMA podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Pawan, and tonight we're talking about UFC Fight Night 170. Capped off with Charles Oliveira's victory via guillotine choke against Kevin Lee, Gilbert Burns' amazing knockout victory against Damian Maia, and then the rest of the card, we have Renato Moicano with a victory, Johnny Walker losing to Nikita Krylov, and a good win for Trinaldo, as well as a lot more news in the MMA world. But let's just get right into it. I'm sure the first thing most of you noticed, like I noticed, was there was no crowd. With the COVID-19 coronavirus going around, a lot of precautionary measures are being taken, and one of those for the Brazilian government was no gatherings over 100 people were allowed. Because of that, the only way to keep the card going was to have no audience, which I guess is better than canceling the entire card. With a lot of Brazilian fighters on the Brazilian card, I'm sure a lot of people would have wanted to see this. 16,000 empty seats. You could hear everything. You could hear the echo. You could hear the punches, the kicks, the breathing, the steps of the fighters. But where this was most unique was the walkout for the main event fight of Charles Oliveira versus Kevin Lee. They did have a walkout. They did seem just as excited as they would be with a crowd, even without it. But when you're going up to a fight, I'm sure you're already in a mindset regardless of who's there, who's watching, and who's not. Also knowing that you have a huge audience watching at home. But yeah, they had pretty good normal walkouts. You could hear a lot more, hear them hugging their coaches, anything they said. Kevin Lee with his screams at the beginning, screams or grunts at the beginning of the round, before the fight started, you could hear him clearly, hear an echo throughout the stadium. But getting right into it, in round one, Oliveira comes out with a jumping front kick, and that just kind of set the pace for what kind of fight this was going to be, or what kind of fight Oliveira was trying to fight with his very unorthodox striking with his jumping front kicks, his elbows, spinning attacks, which did him well in this fight. Him being the taller, rangier fighter, he was able to exploit that. He was pushing Lee back, mixing it up with his punches and kicks, going up, going low, just keeping Kevin Lee guessing at all times. Didn't let down to the pace in the beginning of the first round. Eventually goes for a takedown, even though he was dominating on the feet, especially with his front kicks, which I believe two of them landed to the face of Kevin Lee. But goes for a takedown where he ends up on bottom. Kevin Lee gets on top, and at that point, Oliveira just starts going for every submission possible. Right off the bat, goes for the legs. Kevin Lee on top, throwing a little bit of ground and pound, but defending very well. That's another place where I think the lack of a crowd helped out, with having Firas Zahabi in his corner, a great jiu-jitsu mind right there. He was able to clearly hear everything Zahabi was yelling and pointing out to do, whether it was push the knee down or anything. It was clear to hear for the audience. I'm sure Kevin Lee could hear it in there as well, which probably did help him survive a lot of submission attempts from Charles Oliveira. Like I was saying, he goes right for the legs, followed up, trying to go for a triangle choke, gets the back of Kevin Lee, goes for a rear naked, transitions into a Kimura, and then even strikes from the bottom. So Oliveira was very busy, even though he was on the bottom, he seemed like to be the fighter who was initiating most of the offense, whether that was a few strikes from the bottom or just going from submission to submission to submission attempt. Kevin Lee, at the end of the fight, gets up, lands a beautiful right hand ground and pound. Same thing with elbows. And at the end of the fight, Kevin Lee did land a lot of ground, well, not a lot, but a decent amount of ground and pound. But Oliveira was the offensive fighter for most of that round. In the stand-up, he was doing extraordinarily well against Kevin Lee. And then after the fight got to the ground, even though he was on the bottom, he was the one going for submission attempts, trying to make something happen. That's how the first round ended. Moving on to the second, starts off similar to the first round. Oliveira lands a spinning back kick to the body of Kevin Lee. Oliveira really likes to start off with something exciting at the beginning of a round, kind of like Masvidal with his jumping knee. He runs in with a punch, kick to Darren Till he had. But Oliveira also does that a lot, where he runs forward right at the beginning of the round, tries to land something substantial to start the round off well. But after that, Oliveira kept doing what he was doing on the feet, being the rangier fighter, pushing. Even though he was the rangier fighter, he was the one pushing Kevin Lee backwards, letting his hands go, kicks. Kevin Lee did not have too much of an answer for the stand-up, just being backed up, then circling away to keep himself off of the fence. On the stand-up, I really did think that Kevin Lee was going to do a lot better. I thought he would be able to close in, get on the inside of the lankier Oliveira, and let some of his hands go. It's great boxing ability. But he was getting outboxed, out-kickboxed in the stand-up. Oliveira lands a beautiful front kick to the face of Kevin Lee. And when Kevin Lee did get on the inside and start letting his hands go, Oliveira was walking through it. It seemed like Lee didn't have that power, or at least enough power, to keep Charles off of him, to keep Charles afraid of the movement of the offense of Kevin Lee. Because of that, Oliveira just keeps walking forward. Kevin Lee goes for a takedown in this round. And like I said, without the crowd, you could hear a solid grunt from Kevin Lee when he went for that. You get to hear how strenuous this is. Another hard word to say there. But how hard this is on the body physically for these fighters, which sometimes we start thinking of them less than human because we don't realize that it takes an extraordinary amount of will, ambition, and just mental fortitude, physical fortitude to be able to do something like this, to fight another human being in a cage with very limited rules. But like I said, Kevin Lee shoots for a double leg. You can hear him grunt. He gets the double leg. And Oliveira right where he was from going for submissions at the at the end of the first round, picks it up, goes right into a triangle choke, an armbar attempt, which looked like it was in, but Kevin Lee showed amazing jiu-jitsu abilities to keep avoiding multiple submission attempts from someone who's very, very skilled in jiu-jitsu, a Brazilian. Just that should say enough right there. But from the armbar, transitions right into a triangle. Kevin Lee able to defend that as well. At this point, Charles Oliveira started to seem tired. He was just laying on the ground while Kevin Lee had top position, throwing his hands up, trying to get a stand-up, what it looked like. That's another place where the lack of a crowd may have helped Kevin Lee, especially since with most crowds, when they see a ground and pound, not a ground and pound, but a fight that's more positionally based on the ground, they start to boo. And with a Brazilian crowd going for Oliveira, I'm definitely sure there would have been a lot of boos when Kevin Lee was on top. Charles Oliveira, and that may have got them a stand-up, but without a crowd, without any boos, the fighters were able to work from there. Kevin Lee didn't land too much of significance, a lot of flailing arm punches, tried to use his shoulder like Conor McGregor did against Cowboy Cerrone, but on the ground wasn't too effective. That's how the rest of the round played out until the absolute ending, where Kevin Lee was able to stand up and throw a few decent strikes, a few right hands that seemed like they did some damage, but nothing of significance to dramatically cap off the round. Round 3 starts, and I believe at this point Kevin Lee was thinking he needs to stick with what was working in taking down Oliveira, staying on top, and just grinding out a slow-fought decision victory with top position and light ground and pound, especially since Oliveira was looking tired, wasn't going for submissions every few seconds like he was in the first round. But then third round starts, like I said, Kevin Lee's plan was to stick with what's working. Oliveira jumping front kicks to start off. Like I said, he loves to start off with something exciting, something Masvidal-ish, but in his own way, with his legs especially, since he is a much taller, longer fighter. Kevin Lee catches a kick of Charles Oliveira, gets it to a single leg, goes for a takedown, and gets caught right into a guillotine choke. At that point, it was over for Kevin Lee. It was cinched up. It was tight. Kevin Lee taps to it. But right when Oliveira lets go to get up, Kevin Lee grabs his back, starts arguing with the referee, saying he didn't tap. Again, without a crowd, we heard him clearly. The referee telling Kevin Lee, you could watch it on tape, you tapped. And for anyone who watched it, he clearly tapped. Not sure if that was him in disbelief, if he genuinely thought he didn't tap. Maybe he went out at that exact moment and was right back to consciousness and didn't realize. But eventually he agreed, he understood that he tapped, he lost that fight. He was losing that fight quite clearly. And then a tremendous show of respect between both fighters at the end, where Charles Oliveira went over to Kevin Lee, thanked him for the fight. They sat down together for a minute, and then got into the official announcement of the winner. With that being said, we're going to cut out for a short little small break. When we're back, let's talk about the future of both these fighters, Charles Oliveira and Kevin Lee. So please stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
All right, welcome back. We just talked about the main fight on UFC Fight Night 170, Kevin Lee versus Charles Oliveira, where Oliveira got a guillotine choke finish, defeating Kevin Lee in the third round. Now, but to see what's next for these fighters, with Kevin Lee, it's hard to see where Kevin Lee fits into all of this. I definitely think he should stay with TriStar Gym and Faraz Zahabi, not just a tremendous coach. But we got to see Kevin Lee do a lot better with his submission defense. He was doing great on the ground against someone who's a great Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner. Even though he did get finished in the third round via submission, the first two rounds must have survived 10, maybe 15 different submission attempts from Oliveira. It was able to maintain top position. Especially in the second round, the way he stayed on top and was able to advance position, slightly advanced position, but land ground and pound shots against someone who's known for being a great grappler. Only problem for Kevin Lee is his record is not looking too good. He's 2-4 in his last 6 fights, but his losses have been to top-level competition. The interim title fight loss to Tony, rematch loss to Iaquinta. He moved up in weight to welterweight and lost to RDA, Rafael dos Anjos. At this point, it's hard to see. He's not... it's easy to see he's not championship level ready yet. He definitely does have the capability to be with more experience, but he's also not too low to the point where you can give him other up-and-comers. But at this point, it seems like he needs to build his credibility back. He needs to get a few wins under his belt before moving on for more top-level fighters. He was ranked number 8 and just lost to the ranked number 13 guy in Charles Oliveira. And it's hard to see where he goes here from now. The last thing he wants to be is a gatekeeper for the division. But it seems like another up-and-comer like Gregor Gillespie is what is in the future for him. He did miss weight for this fight again. I believe that's his second time missing weight, or third time missing weight at lightweight. But with his one and only move up to welterweight, he lost to RDA. RDA, a very respectable opponent, top 5, I believe, top 10 for sure in the welterweight division. But that's where we got to figure out where Kevin Lee goes from here. If he does decide to move up to welterweight, since it seems like lightweight has been kind of a trouble for him lately to cut down to, where does he go in the welterweight? He's stuck between 2 very stacked divisions, with lightweight very top-heavy and welterweight just stacked all around. The top 15 fighters, top 10 for sure, any one of them can beat either one on any given day. None of them are easy fights. So moving up to welterweight really would make no sense. But if he cannot maintain weight, he might be forced to. He might have to move up in weight. If he is staying at lightweight, he's going to have to fight some up-and-comer, some 15 to 10 ranked guy, maybe even a lower, just to get some momentum back on his side. He had a great momentum going in with the the Gregor Gillespie win, tremendous win. Seems like he worked everything out at the TriStar gym with Firas Zahabi that he needed to, but with him, he's young, he could still do great things in the sport, but he definitely needs more experience with a little bit lower level guys he can kind of figure out himself with, not the Tonys, not the Khabibs, not the top 5 in the division right now, not the Iaquintas. But for Charles Oliveira, big win for him. He's now on a 7-fight win streak, 14 submissions in the UFC, just surpassed his own most submissions record, which was 13 before this. And again, out of his last 7, I believe that's 6 fights now he has a performance of the night or a fight of the night or some sort of bonus. So he's on a roll. He's on an absolute roll. 30 years of age, kind of in his prime right now, and he looks amazing. He didn't just beat Kevin Lee. He kind of outclassed Kevin Lee, showed that he was better on the feet, he was better on the ground. And at the end of it, Charles Oliveira did call out the winner of Tony versus Khabib. I don't think that will be next for him, since he was ranked at number 13. He'll definitely be moving up, maybe to the top 5, definitely in the top 10 for sure, with this win and with the role he's just been going on, absolutely dominating and stopping his opponents. For him, maybe the loser of Tony versus Khabib, but like I said, it's such a stacked division. We have Justin Gaethje in there. We have Conor McGregor, of course, Tony and Khabib, Donald Cerrone. I'm not sure if he's fighting right now. But besides that, Paul Felder is the most likely. I believe Paul Felder did say he was going to hang up the gloves and go on to commentating. He has a great commentating career ahead of him. But that is a fight that could make sense. Charles Oliveira versus Paul Felder, or the winner of the Paul Felder and Dan Hooker fight, Dan Hooker. Dan Hooker's ranked at number 6. It makes a lot more sense for him and Charles Oliveira to fight. Top 5 ranking, Dan Hooker could be a title eliminator for the upcoming fight. If we have to fit Justin Gaethje somewhere in there, it would be Justin Gaethje and Dan Hooker and Charles Oliveira, who are at the top of the division, who seem to be active fighters. I don't see Conor McGregor trying to fight Charles Oliveira, especially with everything that Charles Oliveira has been able to do with his submissions. I don't think Conor McGregor would stylistically want that match. I don't think Tony or Khabib, the winner, is going to take that fight. And at the top, Justin Gaethje is what seems like is next in line for a title shot. So, again, Oliveira not fitting in too well anywhere here. Like I said, Dan Hooker would be a great fight for him. Paul Felder is coming off a loss, so maybe that's a better fight for Kevin Lee if Paul Felder decides to fight again. Or Cerrone coming off a loss, again, not too exciting of a fight for Charles Oliveira. So it has to be one of the top 5 guys. It would Tony, Khabib, Conor, Justin Poirier, or Dan Hooker is what makes sense. He is ranked very low at 13, especially with such a tremendous run he's been on. It's hard to see why he's rated so low. But that looks like the future for both these fighters. Charles Oliveira getting a top 5 guy if they're not busy between themselves. It looks like Dan Hooker is the most likely fight, and probably a good fight for Oliveira as well. He definitely has a strong chance of winning that fight. Probably would be the favorite, I think, even though he is ranked lower. For Kevin Lee, it's a rebuilding phase. It's trying to get back to where he was, build his name up. He said it himself going into this fight that he was looking for a few fights where he could get some experience under his belt and then go for a title shot, and that's definitely what he needs to do. With that being said, we'll take another short break. When we get back, we are going to talk about the co-main event between Gilbert Burns and Damian Maia. Tremendous knockout victory for Gilbert Burns. So to hear more about that, please stay tuned. We'll be right back.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Alright, welcome back. We just talked about the future of the main event fighters for UFC Fight Night 170, Kevin Lee and Charles Oliveira. A very promising future for Charles Oliveira, it looks like. But moving on to the co-main event of Gilbert Burns versus Damian Maia. Very quick fight, didn't go how I thought it was going to go. With both of these guys being such good grapplers, I really did think this fight was going to be decided on the ground. But Gilbert Burns, a far superior striker, and he proved it in a first-round knockout victory. So let's just jump into how the fight goes out. Starts off with Burns coming out with a lot of feints, a few leg kicks, switching the leg kicks up to body kicks. Doing great on the feet, showing off that he definitely has the advantage in the stand-up game. Damian Maia applied a lot of forward pressure, moving Gilbert Burns back. Gilbert Burns was smaller, so I was hoping Maia would use his reach and size advantage, but being a jiu-jitsu ace, he definitely wanted to get the fight to the ground and try to get a victory there. And as he does, pressure on the feet, moving forward, signature single leg takedown from him. He loves his single legs, and it was kind of guaranteed he was going to go for it, just didn't know when. But with that pressure, he was able to back Gilbert Burns up, eventually get the leg and take Gilbert Burns down. Gilbert Burns did get up very quickly, didn't get to do much with that takedown, Maia, but once they scrambled and they were back up to their feet, Maia was able to push Gilbert Burns up against the fence and make it a clinch war fighting with the hands, hand fighting, sorry. But eventually did get to the back of Gilbert Burns, standing up, got him down, still had his back, and it started to look like it was Damian Maia picking up pace and turning the fight into what we expected with a grappling match. Eventually he gets Gilbert Burns back properly, goes for a rear naked choke, does not get it. Then Maia tries to slip into mount from the back of Gilbert Burns. With that scramble, they're both back up to their feet and back to a stand-up kickboxing fight. Maia feints a jab, throws a jab, and then Gilbert Burns slips just to the inside of the jab and lets go with a overhand or a left hook that landed right over the shoulder of Maia and put Maia down. Maia fell hard. It looked like he was completely switched off, but the way he landed was in a perfect jiu-jitsu style. He landed, hit his hands and back to the floor, got his legs up, didn't roll out of position, didn't get in a bad position. So it looked like he still had his wits in him, but after watching it a few times, it seems like it's just a reaction. Maia has been doing jiu-jitsu for so long. He's such a great grappler. I feel that's his natural position, was to get onto his back, lift his legs up, bent at the knee, waiting for Gilbert Burns to come in. But I don't think he was mentally all there. I think he was somewhat out of it. And at that point, Gilbert Burns raises his hands, doesn't want to go for ground and pound out of respect for Damian Maia. And when the referee didn't stop the fight, he had no choice, pushed Damian Maia's legs out of the way to get side control and landed some vicious ground and pound to end the fight. So, amazing first round knockout or TKO finish for Gilbert Burns. 2 minutes 34 seconds into the first round. And then Burns starts screaming, I believe in Portuguese, not sure exactly what it meant. But with no crowd there, you could hear him completely clearly. For anyone who doesn't know Portuguese, I'm sure they understood exactly what they meant. But that was the effect of no crowd there. Again, with this match, I really thought we would see a lot more high-level groundwork from both fighters. And with no crowd, I thought we'd hear some amazing coaching from both sides. Of course, probably not in English, not easy to understand at all. But definitely did think we were going to get a lot more. I did not see Maia getting knocked out so viciously. But like we said, Maia is not the best on his feet. He definitely wanted to make it a match on the floor, didn't want to make it a grappling match, a jiu-jitsu match, and was starting to get there, but was knocked out before anything of significance that he could do. Right after that, right after the little celebratory victory for Gilbert Burns, he goes to Damian Maia, shows all the respect in the world, and then moves on to thanking Henry Hooft and his his teaming and his coaching with Henry Hooft, saying that the plan was to land the left hook speedy instead of with power, waiting for Maia to throw a left hand to come over top and then land the left hook himself. He got it off the jab, but it was a tremendous left hook. So much power, so much speed behind him. It just landed perfectly on the chin, right on the button where you'd want to land it, right on Maia. Maia, at that point, it was the end of the fight, even though it did need a few ground and pound strikes to cement the victory in the eyes of the referee. After that, he called out Anderson Silva, not for himself, but for Damian Maia, which shows you how much respect he has for Maia. He wasn't even worried about his own call out, his own future. He was talking about Maia, called him a future Hall of Famer. Everything we already know, but it showed the tremendous amount of respect Gilbert Burns has for someone like Damian Maia. Both Brazilians, both great fighters. Crowd would have went extremely nuts if the Brazilian crowd was allowed in to this fight. But with that being said, with such a quick fight, we're going to move on and talk about what the future looks like for both of these fighters, with the Anderson Silva call-out for Damian Maia and a Colby Covington call-out for Gilbert Burns. We'll get to all of that when we're back from a small commercial break, so please stay tuned.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Alright, welcome back. We just recapped the co-main event fight of UFC Fight Night 170. Gilbert Burns' tremendous first round TKO victory over Damian Maia. Great fight, like we discussed, but as for the future of these fighters, with Damian Maia, it seems like he's one of those fighters that will stick around for a long time, just off of his skill and his willingness to fight. He was top 5, number 5, moving or going into this fight. And it doesn't seem like he has his plans on retiring anytime soon. And for his future, Gilbert Burns actually, like I said, called out Anderson Silva for a rematch with Damian Maia. I think that is a great fight to make. I don't believe Anderson Silva is actively looking for a fight, but he's always ready to fight as well. And a rematch between two legends will definitely interest the crowd. That would be a great co-main event for any card just off the name of both of those fighters. And if they're able to have another fight in Brazil at some time after this COVID-19 coronavirus issue is done, I think that would be a great fight for a Brazilian card. Of course, having a lot of fighters that were on this card back on another card for Brazil, where their families, their friends, and fans can definitely come fill up those 16,000 empty seats and cheer for their guys. But as far as for himself, Gilbert Burns calls out Colby Covington. A very interesting fight. Colby did defeat Damian Maia in Brazil, in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and talked a lot of trash to not just Damian Maia, but mainly to the Brazilian people, to the fans, culture. His act that he's been putting on of this bad guy, it really helped him work his way up, especially with the promotion, and get amazing fights. And this is a fight I would not be mad at seeing in Brazil. That could definitely be a main event fight, especially with Colby Covington. I'm definitely sure a lot of Brazilians would love to see Colby fight, just if they want to see him fight to lose. A lot of Mayweather haters like that too. They watch the fight just to watch him lose. Regardless, Mayweather gets paid, and that's kind of Colby's thing here. I'm definitely sure a lot of Brazilians would pay to watch Colby lose, or the opportunity to see Colby lose, especially to a Brazilian. Like I said, Colby beat Maia. Now Gilbert Burns just beat Maia. Burns beat him with a tremendous knockout first round victory, absolute dominance. But I don't see a Colby Covington fight in the future, or at least as the next fight for Gilbert Burns. Colby Covington is ranked at number 2 behind Kamaru Usman, ranked at number 1, and Usman as the champion. Burns definitely needs to jump up in the ranking. He was ranked at number 12. He beat number 5 ranked Damian Maia in a very stacked division. Like I said before, this is a division where at any given day, anyone in the top 10 can possibly beat anyone else in the top 10. It's that competitive. And with that competition, you get to see who the best of the best really is instead of a stagnant division with one completely dominant champion. As far as Colby, I think he's going to be gunning for a rematch with Usman, which makes a lot of sense because of the tremendous fight they had. I believe the Leon Edwards versus Tyron Woodley fight has been canceled or postponed by the UFC due to coronavirus COVID-19 issues. So unless that fight is being reinstated, another fight for Gilbert Burns could be Leon Edwards, number 4 ranked Leon Edwards. That would definitely be a big step up in competition. Even though Damian Maia was ranked at number 5, he was a great fighter, and this was a step up in competition for Gilbert Burns. He definitely cemented himself as top 10 ready for sure. As far as fights that make sense for him right now, Rafael dos Anjos fight could make sense. A Michael Chiesa fight maybe, or Thompson. Thompson fight could make sense. RDA makes a lot of sense. Both Brazilians there again. If it was to be, like I said, a Brazilian card, when gatherings are re-allowed by the government, that would be another tremendous fight to make on the card. But Rafael dos Anjos, a big name, great fighter, huge test for Gilbert Burns. Again, jiu-jitsu guys, they'll definitely have some jiu-jitsu, but stand-up is where we'd want to see that fight go. From there, it really depends on how it goes from there. He's definitely in talks of the top guys in the welterweight division, but nowhere near the top 5. Like I said, it was a stacked division. Usman as champion, Woodley as number 1 contender. We have Colby Covington as number 2, Masvidal, I believe, at number 3, George Masvidal, and Leon Edwards, not as big a name, but he was supposed to have that fight with Woodley. See how that plays out. Maybe a fight of winner or loser of that fight could fight Gilbert Burns for his come-up victory and working his way into a challenger's position. Back to Damian Maia. He's definitely going to go down in the rank. He's no longer top 5. Anderson Silva fight does not upset me at all. A great fight for both fighters, both legendary fighters. It's a great Brazilian fighter, like I said. Anderson Silva coming off of his loss to his championship contention loss to Israel Adesanya. Both guys coming off of losses always makes sense. 2 guys coming off of losses to see where they fit in. Looking at Silva's record real quick, the Spider, in his last fight, like I said, he lost to Jared Cannonier in a TKO loss. I did not see that in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. TKO via leg kick. So Anderson Silva might be out for a while, but not having the best of a record as of late. Lost to Cannonier, lost to Israel Adesanya, a win against Derek Brunson, but before that, a loss to Daniel Cormier, lost to Michael Bisping, a closely contested fight, of course. No contents against Nick Diaz. Anderson Silva looks like he's looking for fights that make sense, either career-wise, as in to get a championship, or legacy fights, and this is definitely a legacy fight for both fighters. A rematch between both fighters where Anderson Silva did win that first fight via decision and defended his middleweight championship. But that is a great Hall of Fame type fight for both fighters. With that being said, We're going to take another short break, and when we're back, we're going to discuss the rest of the fight card with Renato Moicano, with Nikita Krylov, and with Trinaldo. And some more MMA news, especially with what's going on with the COVID-19 coronavirus. Please stay tuned. We'll be right back.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Alright, welcome back. We just recapped and talked about the future of the co-main event fighters of UFC Fight Night 170, Gilbert Burns and Damian Maia. And now we're going to move on to the rest of the fight card. Very good card overall. The main fight on the undercard, Renato Moicano versus Damir Hadzovic. Pretty decisive win for Renato Moicano. It seems like there's a little bit of bad blood involved. I expected this to be a more of a jiu-jitsu war. Again, a Brazilian card, heavy on Brazilian jiu-jitsu, makes a lot of sense. But getting right into it, both fighters came out ready to go. Big strikes right off bat in the middle of the octagon, looking to damage each other. Moicano locks in or grabs a hold of Damir's body and gets a takedown. Quick takedown, stands up from the guard of Damir Hadzovic, quickly jumps over to the back, gets the back, locks in a body triangle, then starts fighting for the rear naked choke submission. Gets it pretty quick. Within under 1 minute of this fight starting, Renato Moicano locks in the body triangle, locks in a rear naked choke, and forces Damir Hadzovic to tap out. And once the fight ended, didn't seem like the bad blood was gone. Damir is sitting there. Renato Moicano gets up, gets into the face of Damir. He's saying something, can't hear exactly what it is right away, but after that starts shouting, I have no problem with you. I never had a problem with you. Let me talk to him. And again, without a crowd, we could hear that clearly. You can clearly hear him shouting at Damir. Damir actually says rematch, which probably is not going to happen. Even Renato laughs it off, says 10 seconds. It wasn't 10 seconds, but could have been. It was under a minute. It was within seconds that he got that win. The bad blood was there. At the end of the fight, after the official announcement, when it was, I believe it was not, it was Michael Bisping. Yeah, Michael Bisping was the interviewer in the octagon, asks Renato Moicano what was wrong. He says a lot of his anger was because there was no Brazilian crowd. He was really excited to fight in front of his family, his friends, his fans. And he had a newborn son. Isaac was a name that he gave, and he wanted to dedicate that fight to him. Very motivated, very ready to go. This was his first fight at lightweight when he moved up from featherweight, I believe. And then he calls out Paul Felder. He was ranked at number 7 in the featherweight, moved up, and now wants to fight the number 7 ranked Paul Felder at lightweight. Seems like a good fight to make. Paul Felder, he showed a lot of respect to Paul Felder, said he's a great fighter and a great commentator. Again, like I said, Paul Felder does have a few options. He had an arguable loss to Dan Hooker, very hard-fought loss, and did decide to hang up the gloves. But if he's back, he has a lot of options, and right now Renato Moicano is definitely one of the options. Moving on, we had Nikita Krylov get a decision victory, a very dominant decision victory over Johnny Walker. Johnny Walker looked like a star before his last two fights, someone who was calling out John Jones in the light heavyweight division, and looked like an unbeatable fighter. He was very unique with his style, and that's what a lot of people like to see, is the unique, unorthodox striking. And Walker came out with that explosive, unorthodox striking, a front kick and attempts a flying knee within the first few seconds of the fight. Kroylov, again, very smart with his tactics, gets a clinch, gets a takedown, trying to tire out Walker to edge a victory, which makes a lot of sense, which is exactly what he wanted to do. He did eventually do. Even though Walker did get back to his feet, Kroylov just right again gets Walker down and just starts tiring him again and again. Kroylov ends up on top at the end of round one. Looks like a very dominant round for Kroylov, but every round starts on the feet, which I guess is what Johnny Walker was looking for in round two. Kroylov lands some great strikes and goes right for a takedown, like he should have. Johnny Walker definitely wanted to keep this fight standing, wanted to land some bombs standing up, but his holes in his ground game were definitely shown. But I feel like he did a lot better. Again, without the crowd, he was able to listen to the advice of his cornermen, his coaches, Firas Zahabi, in a lot of the groundwork, especially because it's a lot slower pace. When it's a grappling match, you can listen for instructions and employ them a lot better. I feel that did help him out in this fight. But again, Kroylov at the beginning of the second round lands a few strikes, goes right for the takedown, gets Johnny Walker up against the fence, and starts landing some good shots, some ground and pound shots. And you can clearly see Johnny Walker starting to tire out at that point. The grappling, it was really tiring for him. And this is a game plan you get to see with a lot of powerful, explosive strikers. The Conor McGregors, like I said, the Johnny Walkers, anyone who is a very explosive fighter, the Francis Ngannous. You want to take them down, hold them down, and tire them out. Not only to win a long-fought decision victory, but to tire them out so they don't have that power in their punches. Khabib did it to Conor McGregor. Stipe Miocic did it to Francis Ngannou, and now Kroylov employed that exact same strategy. Very clever strategy, very smart strategy. Not the hardest to think of, but hard to actually go out and execute. But he did it to Johnny Walker. Now, at the end of this round, Johnny Walker does get top position and land some really good ground and pound. Even gets the back of a turtled Kroylov. Ends up landing a huge knee to Krylov's body while Krylov is down, but the round ends right there with Walker picking it up, but still probably not getting the round. Since so much of the earlier round was Kroylov just dominating on the ground. This round happened right in front of Johnny Walker's corner, right in front of Firas Zahabi and his coach. So for him to be right there, clearly hear his coaches giving him instructions, maybe that's why at the ending he was able to get a better position, get on top and land that ground and pound, and maybe steal the round, but probably, most likely did not take the round just off that ending. Moving on to the third and final round, more of the same. Johnny Walker on his back, Kroylov moving forward, trying to land punches, and Johnny Walker at this point looked completely gassed out. In the stand-up, he was moving back very sluggish. His hands were down. You could tell just by his body language he was completely tired. He wasn't looking for such an explosive punch anymore, or a kick or a flying knee, just because so much has been taken out of him through the grappling. Kroylov lands a beautiful front kick to the body, gets Johnny Walker a little out of position, runs in for the takedown, and Walker ends up on top. And again, you can hear the corner clearly giving instructions to Walker for what to do next in the grappling exchanges. Kroylov just better on the ground, gets better position, and starts getting some strikes in, fighting for position. Johnny Walker throws a few strikes from the bottom, which are not too bad, but you can't really do much with Krylov's head pushed against his chest. He was landing a few of his elbows to the top of the head. Not too much damage, but Kroylov ends off the round with big elbows from top position, a few ground pound shots, and just grinds out a victory, a very slow-fought, hard victory. But in that last round, you could hear the breathing, the grunts of Johnny Walker. You can tell how much of trouble he's having there, how tired he is, how badly he wants to get up, too. But with that said, Johnny Walker, 10th ranked in the light heavyweight division, will be moving down, while Kroylov, ranked at number 12, will be moving up probably into the top 10. Moving on, could have a few fights with Glover Teixeira, Volkan Ozdemir, Gustafsson, if he's still planning on fighting. Gustafsson, I believe, is ranked at number 7. But Kroylov seems to be on his way up with Johnny Walker going down. That's 2 losses back-to-back. Johnny Walker definitely needs some more experience under his belt, especially with his ground game. It seems like most fighters will now have a clear-cut plan to take Johnny Walker down and outwork him there. Moving on to the last fight, or the first fight on the undercard of UFC 170, Fight Night 170. Francisco Trinaldo beats John Makdessi pretty much the way I thought it was going to go. Both of these guys, stand-up fighters, kickboxing fighters, very similar in style, very similar in size, big age difference. Trinaldo a lot older, I believe 49 was his age, or in his 40s for sure. But Trinaldo, a lot more explosive, a lot more power, and that's what won him this fight. Makdessi starts off first round just mainly side kicks, low kicks, not using his hands at all, just trying to keep Trinaldo at bay, not wanting to engage with hands, just trying to get more points and stay far away, make it a technical chess match, while Trinaldo was trying to move in with switch kicks, more powerful kicks, switching his kicks from low kicks to high kicks, body kicks, and very powerful hands. He would jump in, moving forward, very pressure dominant fighter, especially against someone who wasn't willing to engage as much with the hands because of Trinaldo's power. Round 2, it was more of the same. Makdessi mainly throwing kicks, low kicks, and just side kicks, trying to keep Trinaldo, at bay, not letting him get close enough to let his hands go. But Trinaldo was just landing the more powerful shots. Even though Makdessi was landing a similar number of shots, Makdessi wasn't landing with substance behind any of his shots. Most of them were trying to stay away. He was moving back the entire first round and moving into the second round, moving back, giving Trinaldo time to breathe, giving Trinaldo opportunities to move forward and just look like the better fighter. In the end of round 2, Makdessi starts picking up, lets his hands go a bit more, but nowhere near enough to get that round for him either. So moving to third round, Makdessi really needs this round, and he starts to fight a bit better. He's not moving back anymore. He's a lot more stationary, willing to trade with Trinaldo, but still a little too late. Trinaldo still probably won the last round and edges out a victory, a clear victory, not ranked in the lightweight division, the lightweight division, but definitely put a mark and definitely made sure that you realize, despite his age, he is still a very good competitor and give trouble to a lot of fighters on the way up. With that being said, we are going to move on and talk about more MMA news, especially with the COVID-19 coronavirus and how that's going to affect the future of mixed martial arts. So please stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal
Listen now.
Alright, and we are back. We just recapped the main fight card of UFC Fight Night 170, the main event, the co-main event, and the undercard, which seemed to be a lot of great fights. The main three fights ending via submission or knockout, the other two via decision, but now we're going to move on to more mixed martial arts news. Starting with the elephant in the room, the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic. Quick little thing, I am on self-isolation because someone at work said their significant other did test positive, later on saying that did not test positive, it was just strep throat, but because I did have the common cold, I am on self-isolation until all symptoms get better. But with that being said, the coronavirus is causing a lot of issues for a lot of sports. The NBA, basketball, baseball, the NHL, hockey, all of them pushing back or canceling their season until further notice. Not sure if it's going to be back or not, but luckily mixed martial art does not have a huge roster for such a virus to spread. It's not a team sport. But it must be difficult for the gyms. I know a lot of gyms are closing, a lot of boxing gyms, a lot of mixed martial arts gyms are not open, especially in mainland China. We've seen Wei Li have to change her camp multiple times due to the coronavirus. But with this card, this was the first card in Brasília, Brazil, where the event was almost shut down because of the COVID-19 virus. Like I said, 16,000 seats were completely empty. No crowd to watch besides the staff that was there. Luckily, the card still did go on. As the saying goes, the show must go on, and it did. A lot of fighters were upset. Brazilian fighters fighting in Brazil, there was their chance to fight in front of friends, family, but no one was able to show up because no gatherings over 100 were allowed in Brazil. But how is this going to affect the rest of MMA? For today, we've seen a few times where there was grappling work going on, a little bit of stalling. There was no stand-up because normally the boos from a crowd when a fight goes to the ground and seems to be stalling out, the boos from the crowd is what gets the referees involved, gets them to stand up, and also influences the judges. With this fight card, without any crowd, we saw there was no influence on the judges by the crowd, no influences on the referee by the crowd for any stand-ups, but also we heard the corners of both fighters a lot better. That not just making it easier for the fighters to follow instructions, get instructions, especially in the grappling exchanges, which are a lot slower, a lot more thinking involved. We saw Faraz Zahabi in the corner giving great advice to his fighters. But other than that, we've seen the corners yelling out good work, stuff like that, maybe trying to influence the judges by themselves without a crowd to entice the judges to favor around either way. The cornermen definitely did get involved and tried to do that to a degree. A lot of it could have just been motivating their fighter, actually trying to motivate their fighter, give them a little bit more morale, a little bit more steam in the gas tank, a little bit more gas, but no crowd. Moving forward, the fight card was canceled for the UFC. It was the Leon Edwards versus Tyrone Woodley fight. It was supposed to happen in the UK, but with travel issues between Europe and the United States, that's been a big issue for them. So they're trying to reschedule that fight, maybe an event in the United States where most fighters are. especially with the main Leon Edwards. Leon Edwards in the UK and Tyron Woodley in America. It seems like that's a fight that's going to be really hard to make. But to find other fighters that are in North America to set up a fight card that way is what it looks like is going to happen. I believe the Khabib versus Tony Ferguson fight made for the 5th time, is also being pushed back because of the COVID-19 virus. No longer in New York. I believe it's happening in Vegas again. Khabib did issue a few words to the Nevada State Athletic Commission as to his punishments for the Conor brawl, and had issues with going back to Nevada. Said he's completely happy in New York, would rather fight in New York. But it seems like a lot of cards are going to be shifted around locations and the fights on the card if they can't get fighters in from their countries due to travel bans. But besides that, the COVID-19 doesn't seem to be affecting mixed martial arts to the degree it's affecting other sports. Hopefully we still do get to see most, if not all, of the fights that we were looking forward to in 2020. Hopefully this pandemic does die down and something's done about it. But until then, it seems like either cards are going to be empty without any crowds, which is going to make for a lot of interesting fights, a lot less crowd interaction, a lot easier to hear the coaching, and easier to hear the fighters, whether it's the kicks, the punches, the knees. We completely heard all of that. We heard them bouncing around their footwork in the cage with this fight. Also, the trash talk. Khabib is known to trash talk while holding his opponents down. We're going to hear that a lot more clearly. He did it against Barboza, I believe. He did it against Conor McGregor for sure. That's definitely something we're going to get to hear a lot more of if he chooses to do so. But with that being said, thanks for listening to the GSMC MMA podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask you to please remember to subscribe to the show, and please write a nice review. It really helps us out a lot. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, that would be very appreciated. Thank you for tuning in, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts MMA Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.